keeping the absolute domina's authority in negotiation. This pod is specifically for absolute femdom dealing with consumeristic submissives. You're listening to the Mistress Code. I'm RacyWilde. In absolute femdom, the domina is not a service provider. She's not offering a menu of experiences for the submissive to purchase with consent. She is not there to perform dominance as a commodity. And so negotiation must be approached as a mechanism of structural clarity, not a platform for transactional exchange. Commodified domination submission is where desire is treated like currency, and the domina's role is shaped according to what the submissive is willing to pay for in the language of permission. But this structure is inherently antithetical to real domination. When submission is conditional upon satisfaction, power is no longer power. It has become a product. For the domina to protect her authority, she must resist this subtle but pervasive commercial framing. It is not uncommon for a submissive, even unconsciously, to approach negotiation with a consumerist mindset, expressing his preferences as entitlements, disguising his needs as communication, and assessing her responses as if she were auditioning for his fantasy. This is not submission. This is fetishistic control disguised as consent. The book Venus in Furs is a perfect example of this. For absolute femdom, the domina's authority must remain intact by refusing to enter into the submissive's purchasing logic. This does not mean she disregards his preferences or needs. They may be heard, considered, and even utilized, but they do not direct her. The domina listens not to please, but to decide on what she wants to do with the information. However, don't mistake receptivity to the submissive as submission to his desires. It is not. It is a practice of discernment. Some of the most consistently misunderstood concepts in BDSM and domination frameworks are the following. A domina's ethics on being receptive to her submissive is a reflection of her integrity, not accommodation of him. The domina does not avoid harm by relinquishing her power, but by having strong, safe protocols in place. Safety is not achieved through shared authorship, but through clear intentions to the submissive. And care is not expressed by obeying boundaries, but by designing play that never requires transgressing them in the first place. Absolute femdom is about taking responsibility to the highest form. This means that a domina protects her authority from commodification while she simultaneously protects the strength of the dynamic. Thus, she ensures that what unfolds in a scene or a dynamic is aligned with her personal integrity on both safety and her erotic truth. Because the first consent in absolute femdom is positional, a double threshold crossing, the domina is granted more power. Thus, the safeguards must be more refined, not less. Many people, particularly from vanilla or kink-curious backgrounds, become suspicious of this. They assume that because absolute femdom does not emphasize itemized negotiation for acts, scripts, and expectations, that safety is weakened, or that reducing the submissive's control means a loss of ethical structure. But this is a projection of vanilla logic. As mentioned in previous pods, In the vanilla world, negotiation is often transactional. Both parties state what they want and then barter until a compromise is reached. It is rooted in mutual satisfaction, not power asymmetry. When imported into femdom without adjustment for power structure, the model creates confusion. Power-based dynamics do not function like equal exchange contracts. Instead, they operate on orientation, the direction of power, on design, and most of all, the structure of the dynamic. This is where the Absolute Domina activates what I call living consent. She reads, senses, and attunes to her submissive, not through consent verbal check-ins or requests for micro permissions, but through embodied attentiveness. She remains alert to signs of overwhelm, emotional dysregulation, or disassociation. Rather than outsourcing responsibility to continual verbal affirmation, she integrates safety into her structure by maintaining a fluid, sensory-based feedback loop. While she may request explicit threshold signals, she also exercises judgment based on her own perception of the submissive's capacity and psychological state. In doing so, she preserves the integrity of the container the submissive has consented to enter. And yes, sometimes this means the domina will reduce intensity or call a scene to a close, even if the submissive insists he can endure more or begs her to continue. That decision is hers to make. She holds the authority of care. Because an absolute domina's power is authentic, this reciprocal clarity is what makes absolute domination both ethical and responsible. Being so consent enhanced, it is designed to support a deeper immersion into power by establishing a more robust architecture of care. Thus, working together as a complete system is blanket consent, crossing thresholds, continuous consent, traffic light system, threshold scaling of 1 to 10, etc., and living consent, mutual attunement. The illusion of uninfluenced consent. There's a common assumption, often borrowed from legal frameworks or vanilla relationship therapy, that for consent to be fully ethical, it must be uncoerced, unpressured, and free from all forms of influence. This standard makes sense in theory, and indeed it underpins how to safeguard autonomy in most interpersonal negotiations. But it becomes more complicated and less relevant within femdom. Why? Because femdom is not a neutral dynamic where two people shed their orientations in order to have a clean debate about preferences. It is not an evenly matched, zero pressure context. Femdom, particularly absolute femdom, for many is an erotic, power-based orientation. The domina does not step out of her power in order to discuss the possibility of having it. She is already in her power. It is who she is. Relatively, it is the same for the submissive as well. To ask a domina to leave her power at the door in order to assume uninfluenced negotiation is not only conceptually confusing, it is a denial of her being. It would be like asking a gay man to become straight for the duration of a discussion about gay rights. The premise itself is absurd, and yet many models of kink negotiation continue to treat power-based dynamics as if they were role-play scenarios. They assume neutrality is the ethical baseline, when in fact it is awareness, not neutrality, that constitutes true consent in femdom. In my own experience, I've often encountered submissives who become quickly mesmerized by a domina. They are so eager to please and so overwhelmed by the atmosphere of domination that they'll say yes to almost anything. And this is not a compliment, but complicates negotiations and consent protocols. When this occurs, I deliberately slow down the process. I do not exploit their eagerness, but I educate them. I tend to over-explain, to try to steal their enthusiasm, to get the submissive on a neutral level as much as possible. This can be difficult when just being in your presence makes them gaga. However, because of the kind of domina I am, I need to know without question that the submissive is not saying yes to me simply because they are enchanted. I need to know they are saying yes from clarity, not intoxication. My vetting process, therefore, is designed to be longer to specifically get the submissive to a sane level for consent. And yes, this frustrates many. Some even disappear. But this too is useful. The ones who drop off were never seeking true domination. They were seeking a fast track to their own gratification. Their frustration reveals their motive. The ones who stay, who keep listening, learning, and staying attuned, those are the ones with the potential for true submission to me. Only when I feel a submissive is truly ready, when they've learned enough, stabilized enough, and witnessed enough of my real dominance to make an informed decision, only then do I initiate the formal negotiation, better described as initiation, for real domination. Before that, everything was just scene-based, not living femdom. Just a sample of what is to come so they can decide whether or not to enter my domain. This is part of negotiation as orientation, not transaction. It safeguards not just the submissive's well-being, but my own integrity as a domina. I will not commodify or barter my power to prove that I'm ethical. I simply rise above the norm to ensure I can live my truth, which includes keeping my integrity for a safe, sane, and consensual femdom.